Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And my card for not only this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, but I'm using some of the just released products from Simon Says Stamps Be Bold release, which is their March 2024 release. I will have a link to the entire release in the description box below the video. And then I'll have a link to the Color Throwdown Challenge. As always, that'll be linked in my blog post. Also linked directly below the video. So I did some 3D embossing, a little bit ink blending, very simple watercolor. I think anybody can do this sort of watercolor. I used the new Dragonfly wafer die, which a lot of you guys know I have a soft spot for anything Dragonfly related, and especially wafer dies. They're perfect. So, as always, I'll show you guys how I made this card. I'll have links to all the supplies I used in the description box below. All of the links are affiliate links. All that means is if you click on any of my links and place an order, I get a little kickback at the end of the month at no additional cost to you guys, and that's what helps fund the channel, pay the bills, etc. And yeah, keep watching. I'll show you guys how I made this card. So I'm using the new 3D embossing folder that also comes with cutting dies. This is the Poppy Bundle, it's called. And I'm not going to use the cutting dies. I did die cut the florals like separately, and then I didn't end up using them. So I'll just save them for another project. So I'm using some distress watercolor paper, and I lightly misted one side with water just to soften it a little bit so it embosses better. And then ran that through my EMPRESS die cutting machine to get all of that embossed fabulousness. This is another one where on like if you wanted to do like clean and simple, you know, like black, white, and gold that I love, it's like leave it like that, add a die cut sentiment, maybe a little bit of splatter, fabulous, you know. But I wanted to do some watercoloring. So I started off with just simple ink blending. I used just a couple different colors of Simon's Pawsitively saturated inks. I started with Sprout, and then I took Lemonade just from the top. I'm not worried about overlapping anything, you know, the blooms, etc., because I'm going to paint kind of over this. And yeah, it'll be fine. So I just used my blending brushes, blended on a bit of color just to kind of fill in the background a little bit. And then I'm using my little Altenew watercolors to paint over the 3D embossing. And I've talked about this in other videos. There is something about the no-line look of 3D embossing that I really like. Like, I love the look of no-line watercolor. Just full stop. It's gorgeous. But when you stamp images to watercolor, like, you know, in a no-line style, I find those like a little more time-consuming. I get a little more hung up on it, and it's not my favorite thing to do. It's because it does require more patience. But with doing things like this, like just kind of painting over the embossing, I don't know. I find it very freeing. Like there's no stamp lines to worry about. You're just painting like the raised edges. That's it. So I started with the stems and just a little bit of green. And for that, I'm using my smallest brush. This is like a little size 2 brush. And then after I've done the stems, I end up pulling out one of my little Pawsitively everything little tools there, my little silicone paw there, just to hold those little watercolor, you know, cakes in place so that they're not dancing all over my desk. And for the blooms, I'm using 2 brushes. They're both the same size. These are like size 4 brushes. And I use one brush to apply the watercolor, you know, so I swirl it in the cake, I apply it. The second brush is basically clean. It's got like a little bit of water on it. And I apply the color with the one brush, and then I take the second clean brush and just pull it out, which with the yellow doesn't really look like much. Like doesn't really look like I'm doing anything. But you can see it more when I get to the pink. Basically, that just gives me kind of a darker area at like the base of these petals. And then, you know, it lightens up towards the top. And again, this was simple. This wasn't super complicated. It helps too. Like these florals are fairly like simpler shapes. You know, this isn't very super detailed. Like, you know, because some embossed folders, we've got, you know, all sorts of layers of the blooms, etc., etc. This is a good one for, you know, if you want to kind of experiment with coloring like this, whether it's with watercolor, you can do this with alcohol markers or water-based markers, you know, kind of whatever floats your boat. And I think it would be, if you want to kind of practice sort of that no line look, this would be a good one. I need to play with it even more because I got, more ideas as I was coloring with it, and other color combos, all the things. So you can see it a little better with the pink. Go in with the one brush and apply it kind of at the base of the petal. And then I take the second brush that's a little cleaner and, kind of pull that color out. And off to the side, like off camera, I do have a cloth that I'm just wiping my brush on the second brush so that it's not picking up too much, color, so that I can get that like variation there. And yeah, I just worked my way around, kind of just alternating the colors. So I did, some of the flowers yellow, some of the flowers pink. Just very, very simple, really fun. And then once I'm done this, of course, I'm going to add like 3 different kinds of splatter. Really, again, if you've watched my videos, are you shocked? And if you're new, welcome to the chaos. And yeah, the splatter, it's an obsession. It's fun. So put this in my splat box. For the first bits of splatter, I'm using just those same watercolors and that tiny little brush, that little tiny brush, because I don't want to add a ton. I just want to add a little bit of texture with those colors. So I'm kind of keeping the colors to their same little areas. So, I splattered the yellow around the yellow flowers. I'm going to splatter the pink kind of around the pink flowers. Just swirling it in the little watercolor cake, tapping it over top of those areas. And then the green, I'm going to kind of put everywhere because, just to kind of fill in the background a little bit, add that bit of texture that I love. So this one I kind of go around, along the bottom, around the stems, and then just kind of everywhere, because why not? So I did that first, and then I'm going to add shimmer splatter, of course. And this is the Picket Fence Paper Splatter Watercolor, the liquid white Snowflake. This is the one that gives a similar look as Ranger Perfect Pearl powder mixed with water, which I've done in a ton of videos. It's just shimmery goodness. So it doesn't look like much at the moment, but on the finished card and when it's tilted in the light, that's where you see it. So I can go in a little heavier handed with this, like add quite a bit of this as splatter, because it's subtle, but it's pretty. So I added a bunch of that. This time using my fan brush. This just gives me, bigger splotchy bits. I've had people asking why I've been switching between brushes. Honestly, some of it's just a convenience thing. There's, whatever's handy, whatever's sitting beside me. But also the fan brush does give more. You get a lot more splatter. Whereas using that little brush I used earlier, you get fine little delicate bits of splatter here and there. So again, it's just personal preference and whatever you want to do. So after I did the shimmery splatter, I went in with my white gouache, put that on my palette, watered it down. This goes on a little more, like it looks a little more opaque, but as it dries, it kind of dries back a little bit. It absorbs a bit of the color. And it just gives, again, just more texture. So I did all that splattering, and then I die cut my die cut pieces. So for the Dragonfly, this is the new Whirl Dragonfly wafer die set. And I die cut the wings from Lawn Fawn's Pearlescent Vellum. Love. I've used this many times. That's like the majority of the use of that vellum is for things like this, like little bug wings, etc., because it's shimmery, fabulous vellum. And I really like that die set because it like die cuts all of that detail into the wings. And when you die cut vellum with dies like that, the vellum just naturally curls. Perfect. So I adhered them together. The body I just die cut from a scrap of black cardstock. And then I'm going to come back to that Dragonfly in a minute. But then while I was doing that, I was also die cutting scraps of white cardstock and some dull pink cardstock using the new CZ Design Happy wafer dies. So die cut the words, stacked them together for dimension as is tradition, and then adhered them to the outline that I die cut from the pink cardstock. And then for this little Dragonfly, I took the green watercolor and just a little bit of that liquid white Snowflake paper splatter, mixed them together just on my work surface, and then used my little brush and just painted this over the body of the Dragonfly, because I decided that like the black cardstock was a little too harsh, because my background's a little softer, etc. Plus this gives it that little extra something. There's a little bit of shimmer there, that green sort of tint to it. It's kind of neat. So I just painted it on with that little brush, let that dry. And then for my like companion sentiments and the sentiments I'm going to stamp on the inside, I'm using the coordinating CZ Design Happy Combos stamp set. So the birthday word I just stamped onto a piece of white cardstock, and I used that same ink I was blending with earlier, the Sprout ink. And then my card base, which is going to be a top folding A2 white note card, I'm stamping the rest of the sentiments onto it with, I use that lemonade ink. So I stamped the word happy with that and inked it up and stamped it a few times, you know, to get a good solid impression. And then the other like parts of the sentiment to build the phrase, I'm using Sweets ink, so a pink ink, and then I'm going to use that Sprout ink again so that it'll say sending all the happy vibes, because I do love being able to like build phrases. I've talked about this before when it comes to like sentiment sets. It's fun. It's a nice way to like being able to customize, you know, depending on the occasion, etc. So I got the inside stamped. My splatter is all dry, so I trimmed down that panel to be slightly smaller than my A2 note card. And then that birthday sentiment that I'd stamped, I'm going to die cut that with one of Simon's sentiment label wafer dies. So I got that taped into place, die cut that with my die cut machine, and then I'm going to adhere this sentiment strip along the bottom of this card front with just my craft tacky glue. So we can get that pressed into place, and then once that's adhered, I can flip this over and trim off the bits that are hanging off either side just using my scissors. And then of course I'm going to add a little bit of baker's twine, because it's not just the splatter, also the baker's twine. That's just been the obsession again. I was going to say current obsession. You know, I used to use baker's twine all the time for years and years, and then I just continued to collect and hoard it and stopped using it, and then started using it again. You know, just like everything. It's crafting. It's what we do. So wrap that around the card front, reverse tweezers as always, because that just helps hold the knot while I fiddle, you know, and make the bow, and then trim off the excess. And then to adhere that die cut sentiment, I'm just going to use some thin little foam squares just along the top of this so that it can kind of sit nicely on top of that baker's twine and that other and little sentiment strip there. So get this adhered into place, and then I'm going to put Simon's Big Mama foam tape on the back of this panel, so that will also pop this up a little bit. Just gives a little bit of dimension, but not a whole lot of bulk, because this foam tape is, they call it Big Mama because the roll is enormous. I've shown like what a brand new roll of this looks like. It's huge. It's like the size of a vinyl record. But the foam tape itself is extremely thin, which is what I love. So I put that on the back of the panel and then adhered that to my card base, and then adhered my little dragonfly, just putting a tiny bit of adhesive just right behind the main part of the body. So there you can see like the wings just naturally like curled up. Love it. Love it. And then as my final bit of embellishment, Simon released several more packs of their Pawsitively Dazzling gems. These are glass, and they're pretty. So these are the Taffy ones. So just pink gems. And I sprinkled a few of those onto the card front. And once I was happy with where I had them, I'm just going to adhere them into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue. And then once these are adhered, this card is complete. So we've got, you know, watercolor and a bit of ink blending and shimmer and pretty pearlescent vellum and just all the things. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have a link to the release in the description box below. I'll have a link to my blog post that'll have the info about the Color Throwdown Challenge in a link. I'll have the photos in the blog post, etc., etc. If you expand the description box below, all the info's there for anyone who wants to check that out. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll be seeing you all very soon in the next one. Bye.